Yeah, I too hate that Aang is a bad father in Legend of Korra. I actually don't think that Aang was a bad dad, but I understand why it looks that way and why a lot of us in the fandom don't like that character choice for him. The circumstances are very understandable. Aang was raised by monks. He had Monk Yatso as a father figure, but he didn't actually have parents. What example of fatherhood was he supposed to follow? And before you, well, Katara me, or how did Katara allow this? You mean the other child soldier whose mama died and daddy went off to war when she was mad young? What does she know? Yes, she was motherly in Avatar: The Last Airbender, but that didn't mean that she knew how to raise kids or be a mother. She knows how to run a tribe, and that's ultimately what she ended up doing. And also, I don't like this rhetoric because we're not gonna blame the mama because the daddy wasn't around, which is what some of y'all lean towards with that argument, just so you know. I'm just saying, Kaya and Bumi weren't saying that Katara was the one that was neglectful, and Aang needs to hold that L on his own. And yeah, Aang was a little bit neglectful towards Kaya and Bumi, but does that make him a bad father or just a flawed one? Kaya admits that her and Bumi weren't that interested in learning air nomad culture. It could be that Aang respected their wishes and wasn't trying to force something on them that they weren't interested in, which actually does seem pretty aligned with his character from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I personally do not agree with that method. We are taking a family vacation to learn about your people and to ride the elephant koi. My people's lineage will not be bred out of this bloodline. Both Kaya and Bumi also look back on their relationship with him pretty fondly. Like he was great and supportive when he was there, he just needed to be there more, while being the Avatar, and ensuring that air nomad culture did not die out with him or his son. I'm not saying it's great, but I do think that Aang was trying his best and deserves some grace. I think it's so disappointing with Aang because we loved him so much in Avatar: The Last Airbender. And granted, he was like 12, but he was also so good and so filled with love and had so much respect for all life and all mankind and the spirits and the animals. So to find out in Legend of Korra that the people closest to him, his children, were the most hurt by his actions well into their adulthood, that was an insult. We did not want to see that. And there was no resolution for it in the show. Like, call Korra up, have her put my daddy on the line so that we can hash this out or something. Therapy is expensive. Tenzin also kind of falls into this trap when he goes to find the new airbenders after harmonic convergence. I just kind of find that interesting. You just like your bald-headed daddy. But I personally don't care for how they handled any of Team Avatar from Avatar: The Last Airbender as adults in Legend of Korra, with the exception of Zuko. And don't even get me started on Sokka and Suki because I am trying to swear less.
Right now, Border Patrol is holding hundreds of asylum seekers without food, water, shelter, or medical care for days on end in the open-air detention centers at the California-Mexico border. Come with me as I visit them. A few days ago, I got to go to Jacamba, California, which is about an hour outside of the city of San Diego, where I met up with some other volunteers and we made a bunch of food for the asylum seekers that were detained. Then I got to go with another volunteer named Peter to one of the open-air detention centers.
The Border Patrol says they're not detained.
Yeah, Border Patrol makes the claim that they're not detained, but their response that we just saw right now is them being detained and not being able to leave the site. No, they provide no supplies, and they also, on a regular basis, they'll pull out their guns to make sure that people get in line and stay in line. And the only shelter, food, and water that's provided and medical care is by volunteers, and oftentimes we have a hostile relationship with Border Patrol. Some agents understand that we are doing a humanitarian effort. Other agents see these people as invaders and they treat them like scum.
They just have them out in the desert. There's just nothing here.
There's nothing here. Yeah, sometimes it's only a few hours. Oftentimes it's up to 6 days. We're probably looking at 500 people right now. The migrants, while they're here, do everything they can to stay warm at night. And so what they're doing is they're tearing down the bushes and stuff so that they have something to burn.
It's freezing at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yesterday there were 2 heart attacks?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I don't know. It's just another day.
We're at Camp 177. We just handed out a bunch of waters and flyers. There's people from everywhere here, which I didn't realize it was going to be this diverse of a crowd. They're just lining people up and counting them right now. They don't provide them with any resources. They don't provide them with food. They don't provide them with shelter. And some of them have been here for 5 days. When we were coming in, there was a kid who only had like 30 minutes left on his oxygen. There's nothing here. It's just desert. And then when they do put up tents or some sort of shelter, Border Patrol guys have been taking them down.
So about 1,000 people.
Wow. So we're trying to make food for 1,000 people?
Yeah.
If you'd like to donate or get involved, make sure to follow Al Ultra Lotto on TikTok and on Instagram.
I want you all to take a look at that caption. It says, "You truly deserve more than this. Thanks from the heart." This is a hand-drawn logo of Operation Olive Branch, and it says thanks from Gaza. And I'm angry, not at him, but at this entire situation, because Anwar and his family are in the middle of a horrific humanitarian crisis and genocide. And not only have they thanked us for what we're doing, but they also said that we deserve better. This is so fucking dystopian, and I need all hands on deck because this is the next family we're gonna help with Task 16 of Operation Floodgates. This is Anwar, his beautiful wife, and his 9-month-old baby. And because there is no food and no water and no medical supplies, his wife is having trouble breastfeeding their child. Now, as always, their GFM will be in Operation Olive Branch, but there has been a little bit of a reorganization. If you notice now, the master list that has all the families has been moved to the back, and we have individual tabs depending on what families need. We have prenatal, postpartum, rebuild our home, mutual aid, etc. Anwar's family is going to be under the prenatal/postpartum tab. He is line 4. As always, everyone mentioned in this video will be tagged, and you can pause to read or screenshot if you don't want to hear me go through the instructions. So number 1, you're going to interact with this video by reposting, sharing, liking, commenting, favoriting, etc. Number 2, you're going to comment something regarding the family under this video. For example, Anwar is an English teacher who is stuck in Rafah with his 9-month-old baby and wife who is struggling to breastfeed. Let's get them out. #save Anwar's family. Number 3, you're going to tag these 3 pro-Palestinian creators at the Eric Lewis, at Huda Beauty, at Kalani. Number 4, you're going to comment something regarding the family under the 2 most recent videos of creator Bianca's Cagsleon. You can use the same comment as number 2 if you want, and finally you're going to check my story before tagging the pro-Palestinian creators to see if they have already reposted. So please, let's get together and help this family. Reminder, they are in Operation Olive Branch under prenatal/postpartum on line 4.
Happy Black History Month Eve, y'all. Over the next 29 days, I'll be showcasing African Americans whom I believe to be underrated and underappreciated in our culture. Negroes you need to know. But before I get into that, let's get some negativity out of the way. This evening, I'm going to be collecting some black cards. Yes, if you see your name on this list, I'm going to need your black card on my desk by the end of business today. Number 1, Zeus Network. As a collective, as a people in this country, we've been through some trying times. Slavery, segregation, Reconstruction. But it wasn't until Zeus Network made its television debut that it felt like all 3 of those things were happening at the same time. Zeus Network, your constant mischaracterization and exploitation of black foolishness has been detrimental to the community. Natalie Nunn, you like to get on TV and fight. You like to create hostile environments that result in fights. Well, guess what? I get active too. I like to snatch black cards, and I'm gonna need yours on my desk by the end of business today. And that goes for anybody else affiliated with that godforsaken network. Number 2, this brother right here. Listen, I respect the hustle. I really do. But I gotta tell you, every time I see you dancing on my screen, there's a little voice in my head that says, well, maybe Jim Crow wasn't such a bad idea. And I think that's a problem. I'm never one to catalyze a confrontation between law enforcement and another African American, but I promise you, if I'm ever at an establishment trying to enjoy a meal, and I see you in there gyrating your hips, doing all that buffoonery, I'm not gonna call the police. I'm gonna be on the phone with the National Guard. It's time for you to give up that card. Put your black card on my desk before the end of the day, brother. And please, avoid shaking your ass while you're doing it. Number 3, I'm gonna say a few names to you. They're gonna sound familiar, and then you're gonna figure out where I'm going with this. Clarence Thomas, Tim Scott, Candace Owens. Now look, I don't have a problem with black conservatives. Yes, we have our ideological differences. What I do have a problem with are people who use their platform to denigrate their own folk just to get appeasement from people who would otherwise not care if they got hit by a bus. That I got a problem with. You don't want your black card? It's time to give it up, because I guarantee you, there are some Puerto Ricans or Dominicans who really want it and could use it. Put them on my desk by the end of business today. Number 4, Nick Cannon. I really respect what you do, brother. I've told people I think you're an underrated artist, but how many kids you gonna have? I'm not gonna take your black card. I'm gonna suspend it. Yeah, this is gonna be an administrative suspension. If you can go 1 year without having another kid by a different baby mama, you can get it back. 1 year administrative suspension, or you let me come on wilding out. Number 5, there's a group of black people in this country who I think are just way too liberal with their invitation to cookouts, okay? What are you doing? If you invite everybody to the cookout, guess what? It's no longer the cookout. Now it's a Costco. It's a Patagonia. You look up, there's mayonnaise and raisins and everything. Stop. The cookout has historically been reserved for us. And occasionally, when someone has proven themselves to be an ally, to be worthy of a plate, then we extend that invitation. We don't just hand out invitations because somebody's got an above average amount of rhythm. Use your head. It's over. They're not coming to the cookout anymore because you're not coming to the cookout anymore. Now, if you or anybody you care about found your name on this list, I'm sorry. The rules are the rules. We're going to be doing the month of February without you. I'll check back in on Juneteenth.
I'm going to play 2 videos, and I want you to put 2 and 2 together for me, please. Thank you.
Here we go. I've been an ear doctor for 10 years now, and a significant amount of my African American patients, while I'm doing a history and physical to understand better what's going on with their problem today, they have someone on the phone. They're either just talking on the phone or they're on FaceTime, but a large percentage of my African American patients have someone that's there in the room.
Eddie Bernice Johnson was the first nurse, the third woman from Texas, and the first Black person from Dallas to serve in Congress. She died last week due to allegedly mismanagement of her care at a healthcare facility. The facility she was in was a rehabilitation facility where she had been sent after having had surgery on her spine. According to her family, when they went to visit her just a couple of weeks after her surgery, they found her sitting in her own feces and urine because no one had come to help get her cleaned up. Imagine where the incision might be if you had surgery on your lower spine. Now imagine if you are laying in a bed and you pee and you have a bowel movement, where all of that material might collect. Once you put 2 and 2 together, you won't be surprised to hear that she developed a wound infection that ultimately required her having another surgery to clean out the wound and remove the hardware and put new hardware into her spine. Ultimately, she was not able to recover. The first surgery was September 7th, the second surgery was September 25th, and by mid-December, she was sent home on hospice care.
One of the most dangerous places to be as a Black person is in a medical setting alone. And it doesn't matter what status you have in society, being Black in a medical setting can kill you. Although, to be quite honest with that doctor, I don't think his question was sincere at all. But anyways, I wanted to connect one more dot that disabled people have been trying to fucking scream to the rooftops about for years. The hospital system where she was, the rehab system, Baylor, Scott, and White, was bought out by private equity. It was bought out by private equity. Or as this article likes to call it, consolidated. Do you all get it yet?
Someone said that the neo-colonial world has a necrophilic obsession with the deaths of Black and brown people. And that's so fascinating because we always talk about necropower and necropolitics, but we never talk about just simple necrophilia and how it is exhibited in the way that African history is also treated, you know? That's why I feel uncomfortable learning about African history from people that aren't necessarily African, because there's a tone of desensitization to African deaths that comes with learning about African death from someone that isn't African. Does that make sense? Because all they know about Africa is death. And so when I'm learning about African death from someone that is African, there is this sense of, okay, there is this death and there is a lot of death on the continent, but they're not desensitized, you know? And even when it comes to the industries that have been built around the death of African people, I'm not even just talking about like natural resources. I'm not even talking about like the very overt things that we see in our faces, right? Like the transatlantic slave trade and how the West was essentially built by colonization and the transatlantic slave trade. I'm talking about things like the way that people speak about Basquiat in Black spaces versus in non-Black spaces. Like in Black spaces, when Basquiat is spoken about, it is in very endearing, humanizing ways. In non-Black spaces, it's very like, oh, he died, his drug addiction, and it's like, oh, we're so fascinated with his brain and what was going on. It's like Sarah Botman, but the Sarah Botman of art. And I know that is a very atrocious comparison, but that's the exhibitionism that I see towards the death of Black and brown people. And I mean, that's what we were seeing with George Floyd. Like, why the hell was George Floyd's video being shown everywhere for kids to see? And for me, my thing is like, showing those videos all the time will desensitize people, because people are already desensitized to the deaths of Black people. But if there's another school of thought on that, I'm very open to that. Very, very open to that. Like the people who will know what happened during the transatlantic slave trade, during apartheid, during the Biafran War, during the Haitian Revolution, and then still like not blink an eye. But then most of the people that make most of the money from those industries, from the deaths that happen in those times, are white people, white historians that are just genuinely fascinated with brown black people were able to survive all those circumstances.
There's a video, a real video, of a 16-year-old Palestinian girl having her leg amputated. She has no anesthesia. The doctor performing the amputation is her father, and the amputation taking place is being done on their dining room table. And this video in many ways is not a particularly unique video. We have seen countless images of people, children, even babies, undergoing extreme medical procedures in exceptionally unsanitary places without anesthesia in the last 102 days. I am not saying this to gross anyone out if you haven't seen the video, but I am saying this to remind people that this is still happening, that we are going back to our regular lives, that I'm seeing less and less Palestinian content. And it could be for a myriad of reasons, but I don't want one of those reasons to be that we just simply looked away because we have short attention spans. We've celebrated Christmas and New Year's. We've talked about everything from Ariana Grande to Halle Bailey's new baby. We've debated Martin Luther King's legacy for like the umpteenth year in a row. And the world still spins and multiple things happen at a time, but we can't forget Palestine, because right now, while many Palestinians are offline again, there is a little girl out there undergoing surgery with no anesthesia in conditions we just can't fathom. Many Palestinians have been offline and they're running out of eSIMs to continue to communicate with us. The bombings are still happening, and Bisan has recently told us that she has nowhere to go when this is all over. They're still dropping white phosphorus bombs, and the medical system has essentially collapsed. People are suffering. From the privileged position where most of us, even myself, sit, I understand the urge to look away for a minute, go, she really gaslit us for the whole year, that's crazy, and come back. But the important thing is you have to come back, because there's an entire population of people who for the last 102 days have had crisis after crisis that we cannot fathom, and we cannot give up on them because we have short attention spans. Lock back in.
I am Congolese, specifically Congolese and Angolan. My mother was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but grew up majority of her life in Angola, where her father is from. My father was born and raised in the capital city of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is Kinshasa. So, as you can probably assume, the news that has been circulating currently about Congo and the genocide going on in Congo has definitely affected me a lot. However, this isn't new news to me, and I don't think that this is new information for any Congolese person for that matter. This is something that has been going on for a very long time. However, I completely understand and very much appreciate that with current matters going on in Palestine, there has been a huge spirit and camaraderie in the importance of bringing justice to people. And I want to take this time to educate some people on the history of my country, since I know a lot of people aren't necessarily very informed about what's going on in Congo or just the history of Congo in general. So I'm here to help you learn. If you didn't know, there are two Congos, the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo was also formerly known as Zaire and is also referred to as Congo Belge in reference to its previous Belgian occupancy. The news that we see circulating about the Congolese genocide is in reference to the DRC, the larger state of Congo. Congo is located in the very heart of Africa, right in the center, and is home to the world's second largest rainforest and majority of the world's natural resources. The country is home to natural resources like gemstones, gold, diamonds, but specifically minerals such as lithium and cobalt, which help run the phone that you're watching this video on right now, cars such as Tesla, and the laptops that we use every day for work and school. Technically speaking, because Congo is home to majority of the world's natural resources, on paper, it is one of the wealthiest countries in existence. However, economically speaking, Congo is actually one of the poorest countries to ever exist. Because of Congo's abundance in natural resources, European settlers have been wanting to capitalize the land for a hot minute. The country was colonized in 1908 by King Leopold II of Belgium. Although African merchants have been trading internationally via the Silk Roads for years, during the scramble for Africa, growing European industrial nations wanted to capitalize off of the tensions that were occurring between African kingdoms to be able to take advantage of the natural resources found. Although King Leopold II and many other European nations claimed that their occupancy in African nations was for the betterment of civilization, you may have heard the phrase civilizing savages, or in the name of religion, or simply bettering the economic status of these countries. We all know that's not true. I'm more than happy to make a separate video on the colonization of Congo because it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. I also spent majority of my academic career focusing on the European occupancy in Africa and the history of African culture, language, history. I've posted some of my essays on my blog if you would like to have a read of them as well. But back to the topic at hand. Congo has never had the opportunity to capitalize off of its natural resources. The country gained independence in 1960. To put that into context, that's the same year that Robert Downey Jr., Hugh Grant, and RuPaul Charles were born. This was also the same year that JFK was elected the President of the United States of America, which is also very relevant to Congo's political history that I can touch on in a separate video. You may be wondering, how come Congo has never taken advantage of the natural resources they have in abundance? Well, we've tried. A year after his election as the first president of Congo, Patrice Lumumba was assassinated. After the assassination of Lumumba, Congo was run by infamous dictator Joseph Mobutu, who had the support of the federal government as well as other European countries on his side to help exploit the natural resources of Congo in exchange for putting extra money into his own pocket. During Mobutu's dictatorship, Congo fell into war many times. My grandmother had first-hand accounts of being trapped within Congo during the Second Congolese War and suffered serious PTSD as a result from the atrocities that she had to see. This dictatorship and exploitation of Congo's natural resources has bled into modern-day Congo. You see, in order to utilize Congo's natural resources and to make large profit for companies like Tesla or Apple, you need cheap labor. In order to get cheap labor, Congo is funded by European nations to hire Ugandan and Rwandan militia to forcibly put citizens into slave labor in order to mine these materials. These people are not paid for their work. It is slave labor. These militia groups will literally pick people up off the streets and force them into slave work. These militia groups specifically like to target children because children are seen as more useful for extracting materials out of mines because they're smaller, they have smaller hands, they're more agile, they're able to collect more materials in that sense. I made a Twitter thread that is going to include different resources that you can watch and read to educate yourself on what is currently going on in Congo. But in the meantime, I want to start creating content that focuses on the beauty of my country, educating people on the culture behind my country, the history behind my country, and also the first-hand accounts that I have from my family who experienced the repercussions of what is going on in Congo right now, the repercussions of the war, of everything that's led to the point that Congo is in now. Although it is very important to tell and educate people on the atrocities that are occurring at this very present moment in Congo, my hope is that I will be able to create content that educates people about my country in general so that there is an interest to educate yourself on the harsher realities. Thank you for listening, and I hope that I can post more content about this very soon.
My mutual Tunji already talked about this, but I wanted to talk about specifically influencers like Mr. Beast and public white figures essentially doing these white savior missions in African countries. As someone who is Congolese American, as someone who has been back home, lived back home, who has watched essentially her country be relegated to being described as third world and white people using it as a backdrop to make themselves look good on social media, this video pissed me off. One is that the cost of building these wells or building these shelters literally is the bare minimum. Building a well anywhere in the continent of Africa, regardless of country, is less than $4,000. That is literally lunch money for Mr. B. He has the resources and capital to get water to Flint, Michigan. They have not had clean water in almost a decade. And they just announced they're going to let off the people who are behind it off on charge. There are grassroots orgs that have been working in almost every country in Africa for years to get water, get food, get health resources, but you never hear about them. Why? Because the internet doesn't want you to hear about them. They don't want to hear about communities helping each other. They want you to see your favorite YouTuber go to these countries and save them from the lack of help from their government and from their own people outside of the country. But when we tell y'all that, you never listen to us. You say that we're jealous. You question how much we're doing for our community, even though we've been using our platform to spread awareness. I'm sick and tired of people like this. I'm glad he's getting his fucking lash. Meanwhile, if you want to donate to an organization that is putting forth several well projects, donate to Embrace Relief.
If you care about Palestine, I need you to listen. I'm going to give you a list of instructions and explanations as to why we are doing the things that we're doing. Because I know y'all want to be effective, but one of the things that we are collectively failing Palestinian people in doing is listening. This is the BDS National Committee. They are the people that started the BDS movement. After receiving hundreds of comments and DMs asking why certain companies aren't on the list, they reposted their original picture saying these are the companies that we are boycotting. Just a reminder that the BDS National Committee is the reason that the BDS movement started, and it is Palestini-led and organized. In response to that post, a lot of people were saying, why aren't we boycotting X, Y, and Z? Including companies like Coca-Cola and Disney, and all of that is explained on the BDS website. But to make it short and sweet, boycotting companies like Coca-Cola is largely ineffective. And creating super long list of companies to boycott is also ineffective. Now, if you go to the BDS website and you go to what to boycott, it explains why a decentralized boycott is ineffective. This is a decentralized boycott. This is what happens when we start trying to boycott every single company that we know has ties to Israel. You get small groups of people boycotting some companies, individuals boycotting other companies, and people not boycotting anything because they don't know what's going on. And then you have a centralized boycott where we have a number of fixed targets where everyone is boycotting those companies. If we are able to effectively boycott a small number of companies, we can have a profound effect on those companies, sending signals to other companies that if they don't want to lose their bottom line, that they also need to make changes because nobody is stopping them from being the next target. But the only way to get to more targets is if we're actually effective in those centralized boycotts. The next thing I want to talk about is listening to Palestinian people. When I make a video like this and I show you the BDS National Committee, my expectation is that you will go and follow their work. You will actually give them support in your ears and you will listen to them. I'm going to tag a few other Palestinian creators for you to go and follow, and when I say follow and engage with their content, I mean it. Not just engage with this video, which you should so that more people can be reached with this message, but go and keep up and engage with their content as regularly as you can. You cannot call yourself an ally and simultaneously disregard what the people that you're supposedly an ally to are asking of. Next on the list, we know humanitarian aid by and large has not been getting in, which means a lot of donations aren't getting in. So if you're curious as to what you can donate that you know that people in Palestine are going to get access to, Gaza eSIMs is a great resource. I've already made a video explaining Gaza eSIMs and I will link it down below for you to click and explore more if you are interested in donating. The final thing is, how can you help this message reach people? And how can you engage with content about Palestine and Palestinian people that are making content about Palestine in a way that actually helps their content be reached? And there's a simple few things that I want you to do. Do not use the word BOOST. Get that word out of your vocabulary whenever you're engaging with content like this, please. Here are things you can do instead. Hit the repost button. Watch the video in its entirety. It can be in 2 times. Leave a meaningful comment about the caption, about what's going on, or just hit middle text. Use the predictive text on your keyboard to write at least 5 words. COPYTHELINK. You literally don't even have to send it to anyone. You can just send it to yourself. Or just simply hit the button. And 5th, follow them. Follow people on the ground. Follow people with ties to Palestine. Follow people who have committed to sharing their voices. Because unfortunately right now with the BDS National Committee, I've went through their comment section and I see a lot of people arguing with them and claiming that they as non-Palestinian people and people who have just learned about what's going on in Palestine have a better idea of how to boycott than they do. The organization that literally started the BDS National Movement. We need to be listening, and we need to be listening effectively. I'm gonna link some creators down here. Go and follow them.
Nicki Minaj is essentially the Dr. Seuss of her time, and what I mean when I say that is she's objectively a disgusting and reprehensible person by pretty much all metrics of basic humanity and common decency, yet her one singular talent that appears to be an innate ability to rhyme words together in a silly fashion that particularly resonates with children has cemented her with a legacy she really does not deserve as much as many female rappers who came before her. In case you're not already up to date, the self-proclaimed queen of rape has spent the past 24 hours deflecting from the fact that her husband is a convicted sexual predator who is not allowed near public parks or elementary schools by making fun of Megan Thee Stallion for getting shot, as well as referring to her as Bigfoot. It's always amusing to me how Nicki Minaj immediately jumps to making fun of other people's appearances, as if she didn't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2008 getting illegal Craigslist butt injections from some guy in his basement. And not just that, she lied about it for 10 years and only confessed after her ass cheeks were visibly deflating in public and everybody could already tell. And listen, I'm not at all reveling in the fact that she's a terrible person. I was a very big Nicki Minaj fan growing up. Ask anybody who went to middle school with me. I loved her so much, I would defend her to anybody who would listen. I saw her doing that, I'm gonna put her in and I was like, finally some real music. However, around 2018, when she started intentionally surrounding herself with sex offenders, I kind of fell off the wagon. She was announcing her associations with them faster than she was dropping new music. And it's always especially humorous to me when I see Nicki Minaj as well as her fans attempt to defend her by saying, you only attack the men she associates with for being sexual predators because you don't have anything on her. I beg to differ, Barbs. Because not only are we talking about a woman who once gave a lap dance to a 13-year-old boy, we're talking about a woman who once made a song with a then 16-year-old little twist, in which she says these lyrics. In conclusion, yeah, she's going to hell. Let's hope all that silicone doesn't release too many toxic fumes while she's burning.
Hey everyone, this is Bissam from Gaza. It's the day 90 of this escalation or war against Gaza. We're talking about being under this genocide, under this ethnic cleansing, killing, destruction, displacement of civilians all over Gaza Strip areas for 3 months. So today the bombings were in many places actually, in the middle area of Gaza Strip, especially in Al-Maghazi, Al-Brej, Al-Nusayrat, and Deir al-Balah. So the thing is, the Israeli soldiers and tanks invaded Al-Maghazi refugee camp. They took it over and they completed their way to Deir al-Balah. Deir al-Balah is in the borders between the middle area of Gaza Strip and Khan Yunis. So they are taking over the whole area in the north of Khan Yunis. Now, there is no safe places without the army except Khan Yunis and Rafah. So the bombings were also in Al-Amal neighborhood, Jort al-Lut, Jort al-Aqad, many places around Nasser complex, and the most important one is the 5th floor of the Red Crescent Society building. So this place is full of displaced people. It should provide the social and the medical support for people in these conditions, but it was bombed for the 3rd time since the beginning of the escalation in the south. So the Red Crescent place now is bombed. Another thing is that we found that 70% of the full people were killed since the beginning of this genocide. 31,000 people were women and children, while children were 46%. By the way, in the normal times, normal wars in the world, the amount of killing people, killing children, is no more than 10%. But in Gaza, it's 46% because simply the snipers are also targeting children with an aim to kill them intentionally. They shot them in the head, they shot them in the back, and they kill them. And of course, children are sleeping in the homes, so they are bombed inside their homes. So that's it. Most of the killed people in Gaza Strip were children and women, and this is terrifying but not surprising for the Israeli army actually. This is for now. Keep following to know more about Gaza. Thank you.
Y'all don't know how to use something a little here and there, sprinkle it in every once in a while. No.
Whiteness and capitalism. Hear me out, don't scroll. Whiteness and capitalism make it so that white people run things to the ground. What they call trends is just cultural stand-ins that they don't have because whiteness has taken it away from them. Hear me out. Whiteness makes it so that anything that is a cultural signifier gets erased. In that absence, white people on this app and in other apps are looking for things to fill the void. So they go to other cultures and jump on trends. They appropriate them and they call them trends. I won't even use a black one here. I'm going to use mob wife aesthetic. White people who are disconnected from their European ancestry do not have an aesthetic aside from the American aesthetic that they feel like they can relate to. And because they think the American aesthetic is default because of whiteness and that it's boring, they have to appropriate another one. But they can't call it appropriation, so they'll call it an aesthetic. And then, because whiteness and capitalism go hand in hand, they will run it to the ground like capitalism does. They will mass produce it, they will misrepresent it, they will sell it, they will make money off it to the point where we all get tired and exhausted by it, and it's misrepresented, and then it becomes old, and then by then they pick up a new trend. That's why with AAVE, like we talk about gatekeeping, they'll take our words, they'll misuse it, and they'll run it to the ground. They'll sell things by it. They'll get shows. They'll get, opportunities. They'll get all this spotlight on them running something to the ground because they don't have cultural slang to use. And their misunderstanding of people who do have close connections to their cultures, it's just out of this world. Like, no, Samoan people aren't just in the grocery store doing the haka 24/7. No, black people aren't here just riffing and running with the soul of a gospel singer everywhere. We have places and times where we do these things in our communities, in our own language. Like we do in our own spaces, we do these things. But because social media will post them for our own communities and white people will see them, they're like, that's the newest thing. Because what they don't want the next trend, they want the comfort of culture. They want the comfort of culture, but whiteness doesn't let them have the comfort of culture.
Think about the parallels in the videos I'm about to show you. One is by comedian, actor, and writer Cat Williams.
You probably wonder, why do white people pay so much attention to black people if they don't like them? I don't pay attention to things I don't like.
What's the answer?
The liar knows what lie he told. You see what I'm saying? So even if I made it deceitful and I made you think that the answer is over here, but the answer is really over here, I'm still going to be looking over here. Me, the one that tricked, because I know this is the right answer. Black people have lost their identity, but our oppressors have not lost our identity.
And the other is by journalist, professor, and activist Dr. Mark Lamont Hill.
That's why these writers kept written by himself, written by herself, Phyllis Wheatley, Frederick, because they thought Negroes couldn't read and write. They thought Negroes didn't have the capacity to read and write. And yet they made all the laws to stop us from learning how to do what? Read and write. If we can't read and write, what you trying so hard to stop us for? And the answer is because America has always known what you are. America has always known who you are. America has understood what you're capable of, and they will make you think you ain't nothing at the same time that they exploit your gifts. They'll tell you lazy and make you a slave. They'll tell you dirty and have you clean their house. They'll tell you uncivilized, and we raise their children. They know who you are. But it's time that you listen to who you are, that you understand who you are.
Two different phrasings, same idea. It addresses the lies told by white supremacy culture and how it benefits from the demonization and dehumanization of black people and black culture, while at the same time relying on black humanity and black culture. Love and liberation to you all, and as always, like and follow for more content.
Remember when McDonald's, Disney Plus, and Starbucks did not take us seriously when we said we were gonna boycott them? The numbers are in, baby. The numbers are in. Disney Plus loses a staggering 1.3 million subscribers in just 3 months. Period. Okay? Don't let anybody tell you that boycotting does not work, because look at these numbers. Look at this number. In just 3 months, we were able to make this much damage to Disney Plus. And they were like, oh, but we are hopeful, but in the next few months, we will gain this number back and even more. Lies. Don't give into it. Keep boycotting. Period. McDonald's has also been hit massively, and they're literally so funny. Like, it's crazy. They're like, oh, they're blaming the Israel's war in Gaza for missing sales target. They also lost millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, and now they're like crying boo-hoo. They're so unserious, because remember when they tried to sue the BDS movement in Indonesia? So unserious. McDonald's is so unserious. Sales growth for the fast food chain division for the Middle East, China, and India during October to December reached 0.7%, far below market expectations of 5.5%. Damn, McDonald's, we annihilated you. we chopped off your head. Starbucks also lost, in percentage, they lost a lot of money. I covered that already, but don't let these people fool you. We are doing amazing work, okay? And now they're all crying boo-hoo about their loss and like literally pretending to be okay and saying like, oh, we're gonna gain back these numbers and this, ignore them and continue doing what we need to do, okay? Period. This is absolutely insane. Like McDonald's, with their full chest, even made sure like everybody knew that they were gonna give food to the IDF soldiers, and now they're trying to backpedal and look at this nonsense. It's a human tragedy, what's going on, and I think that does weigh on brands like us. Where was this statement when October was here, November? You didn't say jack. If anything, you fully thought that being on the side of Israel was gonna get you even more popularity, and it backfired. That's literally what these brands did. They thought siding with Israel, because everybody was siding with Israel, that was gonna give them the boost that they wanted, and it backfired because we all were like, you are canceled, period. But yeah, great work, guys. Great work.
Hello, friend. If you are feeling scared and you don't really know what to do, I'm going to point you towards some resources that I think could help. First and foremost, Liz What's Her Face on Instagram has these 2 COVID safety guides right here with just like simple tips and mitigation methods that can help make you safer. Website covid.tips is literally just like a master list of information on COVID. I want to look at the scientific data. Them Fatale posts a lot of videos with like cited, like peer-reviewed research and links to them. For statistics about, how much COVID is spreading, I would go to Lucky Tran, People's CDC, and this guy on Twitter, or X now, I guess. He posts these graphs, these ones. I put this one in my original video. Yeah. And also my Instagram, if you would like to go to it, I have a highlight on my page with just a bunch of this shit like archived there forever, if you would just like to go see that. So anyways, that's it for sources. I'm just going to go through some of the stuff that I do that makes me feel safer. The masks that I use normally are the Well Before 3D KN95s. They aren't N95s, like they don't have the head straps. They do go around the ear. They are adjustable. I would say they kind of hurt my ears just a little bit sometimes, but they fit my face really well. And in filtration data in this mask testing database on this website called Armbrust, which is also a mask manufacturer, they independently test just a shit ton of masks. So those masks that you got from Amazon that are maybe counterfeit, you can actually probably go see if they've tested them. But these filter at I think like 98 or 99%. So they've worked pretty well for me. I've been in a lot of risky ass situations where I've been wearing that mask and I've come out fine. So I do still wear them. And then when I'm at work or in like a high risk situation, I use the 3M N95. So this one, like, it has the head straps. It goes around your head. And these masks are going to give you the best seal, right? A seal is really important for mask fitting. A good fitting mask is obviously going to be like KN95 or better, but it's also going to fit around your face properly. And that's like most of the issue with surgical masks, because surgical masks actually do filter to a pretty high percent, but they don't fit around people's faces properly. So all of that air is just coming in straight through the sides, and that air is not getting filtered. So that's why surgical masks don't end up working for a lot of people. So if you're wearing a surgical mask and you got COVID, that might be why. It's not fitting your face properly. Anyways, those are the 2 masks that I use most of the time. If I'm in like a dance practice, in my dance group, we practice outdoors. Sometimes I'll wear a surgical mask. Most of the time I just wear my KN95 because you can still catch COVID outdoors, unfortunately. And then I'm just yapping, but I'm assuming that if you're here, you're sticking around. I also use nasal spray and mouthwash. There's more information about how these work in, like, I think in COVID tips. There's more information about how it works on Them Fatale's page, on Ty Browse's page, and in the COVID Safety 101 and 102 posts. But this, like, clear, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a xylitol-based nasal spray. And nasal sprays, just in general, they reduce the amount of COVID that sticks in your nasal passage. And how do I say this? Like, when you breathe in COVID, because it is airborne, it sticks in your mucous membranes, sticks in your airways, sticks in your nasal cavity. And that's where it replicates. It keeps replicating, and then it infects you, and then you get sick, right? This helps keep it from sticking, so it can't replicate. That probably sounds insane. There is research to back this up. And same thing for this mouthwash. The chemical that's used in this mouthwash, CPC, cetylpyridinium chloride, I believe, it does the same thing. So I just replaced my normal mouthwash with this mouthwash. This is just the one that I use now when I brush my teeth every night and every morning. So yeah, they help me feel safer. There's evidence to suggest and to back up that these actually can help. Obviously, nothing is 100%. Nothing is 100%. But I feel better about it when I use them. So
I'm so over like celebrity culture and celebrities and major companies, you know? Like recently Beyonce just dropped that she's putting out a new hair care line. I'm not putting that in my head. I'm not putting that in my scalp. There's something about Beyonce that's like, she's very talented. But there's just something about her recently, like there's like no soul or humanity, but like behind her eyes. Like, I don't know what chemicals you're putting in that, Beyonce. I don't trust it. Something about it seems sinister. Like, we're out here, we're struggling to like survive. Like, people can't even feed their children here in America. And you have celebrities like Beyonce's and the Taylor Swifts. First of all, they have people pay hundreds of dollars to go see their concert. Then after the concert, they release a movie. Then they have the people go see the movie. Then they put the movie out so that people can go rent the movie. Like, I don't know about you, but that's ridiculous. That's insanity. Like, I would never do that. And I'm a big Rihanna fan. I'm a big fan of Rihanna. Okay, but if she ever try to play me like that, I'm not doing it. And now we have Apple releasing their Apple Vision that people in the Congo are dying to dig up, risking their lives so Apple can produce new technology and sell it to us for over $3,000. It's like we're in this weird reality, like this weird dream. Like, imagine you're being chased by the killer, and the killer is like, wait. Pick a knife. Do you want the really sharp knife, or do you want the dull knife? And the point is, you don't really win, because you're going to suffer and probably die in the end. You know, it's kind of like they're just playing in your face and laughing at you. And that's how I feel about like these big companies and these celebrities. Like, there's no way they don't see what's going on, like, in the world, in the general public. Because it's either they just don't care, or they're just like in this bubble, like they don't know what's going on outside the bubble. And it's driving me insane. And I'm like so over it.
Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew.
Pre-order now. Let's get uncomfortable.
So that video was one of the first things I saw on my timeline this morning. And before having my coffee, before getting myself together, I had to say something about it because I was so irate, right? Because the truth is, I despise Emmanuel Acho, the black guy in that video. I despise him. I mean, truly, if there was a definition of despised, for me, his face would be right next to it. He is an anti-black grifter, and that book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, is a prime example of it. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Emmanuel Acho, during the summer of 2020, when we were all out protesting, to end police violence, to end carceral violence, so on and so forth, Emmanuel Acho was making social media videos, hanging out with the police and hanging out with certain problematic groups and having these uncomfortable conversations with him as a black man, where white people can ask him anything like, "Oh, do you really hate the police?" And he'd be like, "No, we don't hate the police. We want the police to love us back," and stuff like that. White people ate it up. White people absolutely loved it. So then he came out with a book also Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, and that book came out at the same time as my book, The Black Friend of Being a Better White Person. So both our books are out. They both become New York Times bestsellers, and they stay on the list for weeks and weeks and weeks. What ultimately happened, though, because Emmanuel Acho's book was all about making white people feel better about being white, right? It didn't move the needle or anything. It didn't have any real conversations. It was actually deeply problematic because Emmanuel Acho doesn't have a background in the history of race or white supremacy or constructs of white supremacy at all. So his book was meant to make white people feel good about themselves, like everything's okay. And my book was meant to actually do something, right? Actually point out the issues with our interpersonal and systemic ways of living. And so because white people loved Emmanuel Acho's book, not just white, I would say just bookstores and things like that stopped carrying my book in favor of carrying his because they're like, well, we really love his book, but Emmanuel like makes people feel good, right? Because this is what he does. Emmanuel is not trying to change anything. Emmanuel is a Zionist. Emmanuel is a white supremacist. Emmanuel is anti-black. Emmanuel is a capitalist. Emmanuel is a horrible person who like has no right to be in these spaces again. Like, so now he has used his powers to now get white people to think that a black man and the black community is in support of Israel through another fuck shit book. It's a joke. It's really a joke. But you know, if you want to actually read something, go read a Palestinian author. And if you want to read about race, here's a young adult book on race. God, fucking Emmanuel Acho.
If you have an ounce of humanity left in you, please stop scrolling, like this video, share this video, show this to every single person you know, because Israel has just prohibited the entry for insulin pens for children, right? For type 1 diabetic children, insulin pens, they have prohibited the entry for that, and that was revealed in a press conference on January 24 by James McGoldrick, who's the humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territory.
The goods that are being prohibited, it's a full range. We keep submitting lists to the Israeli authorities for clearance of goods. Some of it is medical material. One example would be most recently the pens that are used for insulin for children have been recently put on that list. In terms of the reasons and the rationale for it, I really can't explain what that is because I don't know.
If a person with type 1 diabetes does not take insulin, they can die dead in a matter of weeks. For what reason are you banning insulin pens for children? By the way, the prohibition of goods into Gaza controlled by Israel, for what reason, God knows what, is not something new. For example, on the screen I'm putting a document from 2010 from a not-for-profit organization named Gisha, whose job is basically to monitor the goods that are permitted into Gaza and the goods that are not permitted into Gaza. And they verify this information by business people and tradespeople because Israel refuses to post an official list of what's allowed and what's not allowed into Gaza. Because the moment they put on a list that cattle is not allowed into Gaza, that wood for construction is not allowed into Gaza, that normal everyday objects are not allowed into Gaza, that's the moment where a person with even half an IQ point will be able to recognize the dehumanizing and the degrading position that the Gazans are basically living in. So yes, a ceasefire is needed, and on top of that, Israel has to roll back all the degrading and dehumanizing practices that they've been doing for decades, because even if there was the purest and most pristine ceasefire of all time, there will still be children in Gaza dying with type 1 diabetes because Israel has prohibited the entry of insulin pens into Gaza.
I'm going to say something controversial, and your cognitive dissonance will deactivate your critical thinking the moment that you feel triggered. I'm not trying to offend you, but if you find yourself upset, self-reflect. I'm going to talk about 3 things that seem like they have no correlation to one another. I'm going to talk about Aaron Bushnell self-immolating outside of the Israeli embassy in DC. I'm going to talk about taking shrooms and smoking weed. I'm going to talk about social media, television, movies, and the news cycle. And I'm going to show you how all of these connect together. When we take shrooms, you experience an emotional peak. You go from here to here to here to here. When you smoke weed, depending on the strain, either you experience a burst in creativity, you experience some sort of euphoric sedation, or you experience a heightened sense of paranoia and anxiety. When you watch TikTok, first thing in the morning. You might watch a video of a baby laughing. The next thing is a white cop playing basketball with black kids in the middle of the street. The next video is a white cop holding a black man at gunpoint for a simple traffic stop. The next video after that is TikTok shop trying to sell you a spin brush. The next video after that is a girlfriend being cheated on for the 400th time by her boyfriend and everybody in the comment section dragging her. You're going to see content that takes you here, 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 here. When you watch the news, what do? They give you heavy content, light content, heavy content, light content, because if they only give you one or the other, you won't watch it. You will not engage. And then you have television and movies. The very first time graphic content hit the screens, it caused a fucking uproar to the point where they created a rating system. Rated G, rated PG-13, rated R, TVMA, TV-14. It got to the point where they had to put viewers' discretion advised, not suitable for viewers under the age of, because they knew it would have effects on the psyche. But the problem is that I think we watch people die so often on screen for entertainment's sake that we have become desensitized. And I know we use this word often, but I don't think we're very honest about what that means, to the point where when we watch real people die on camera, it doesn't have the effects on us that it's supposed to. I watched the Aaron Bushnell video 4 times before I shed a tear, and I talked to my therapist about it, and she said you can't force emotions. You might feel numb up front, like you're supposed to feel more, but you can't, simply because of how much you've been watching over the last few months. And all I can think about is the simple fact that if we hadn't been so desensitized, if our empathy hadn't been so sedated, if this was a different time and it was not normal to watch death for the sake of enjoyment, then most of us would either be rioting in the streets and making January 6th look like a cakewalk, or we would be crying, shitting, screaming, and throwing up in the fetal position because we wouldn't be able to handle this. And the simple fact that we just scroll and go on about our lives, this is not normal. And people keep saying, why haven't we revolted? Why haven't we started a revolution? We rioted dawn. How are we supposed to revolt if you're only outraged in 30-second intervals? The simple fact that you can watch something funny after watching something distressing, it may not dissipate the outrage that you feel, but it might take it down from being outraged to upset. And now upset doesn't really feel like doing anything. Upset just feels upset. And that's scary work.
I think it's really scary that we are starting to see less and less Palestine content, specifically what is going on in Palestine from Palestinian people, because a lot of people are like losing their lives right now in the most graphic, horrifying ways. Palestinian people are being forced to drink polluted water and eat grass. Let me say that again. Human beings are being forced to eat grass and drink polluted water. Water that was polluted by the IDF. I've been reposting a multitude of GoFundMes from people in Palestine, and it like really breaks my heart. It really does. The fact that it costs money to leave. The fact that it costs money to leave and you're not even guaranteed to go. It's honestly tragic. And again, it just feels like the world isn't doing anything about it. We, as the people within the world, are reposting, talking about it, uplifting voices, sharing, protesting, girl-cotting. Like, we as a people are doing a lot. But I feel like the world's governments are like constantly failing us. Constantly failing us. I don't know if you need a confirmation for this or not, but I'll show it anyway. Justin Trudeau, the head of Canada, admitted that they sent military exports to Israel right after October 7th. They claim it was non-lethal, but they are sending aid and support to Israel, and they have been since October 7th. And the reason why I was like, I don't even need to really show you this, because it's fairly obvious that white countries are going to support their white safe haven in the Middle East, right? I am not surprised. And even though that article specifies non-lethal, I can guarantee you without a shadow of a doubt that Canada is sending weapons, sending troops, and other things to Israel. Just like Biden and the American government. And I really mean all forms of American government. Local, state, federal, you name it. Millions upon billions of dollars is sent to Israel every single day. I would find it really hard to believe that there is not a single United States troop in Israel. I will find it to be impossible, almost, right? Like, it's obvious. I don't need Joe Biden to admit it. I just know he's sending troops over there, right? In the same way, I don't really need confirmation from the EU, the UK, Australia. Like, if it looks like this, it's supporting Israel in every way it can. And they can lie about it because, again, they're government officials. What consequence do you get for lying as a government official?
Nothing. And that's what's scary, right? But yeah, like the governments of the world are not only complacent, but they have active hands-on interaction with what's going on. And it makes me feel like I'm going crazy sometimes because, the ICJ, the UN, all of these global entities meant to uphold peace and justice have just proven that democracy is dead and they only serve the system. They only serve to uphold the system of white supremacy, the patriarchy, colonization. And it's gross. I think it's actually kind of wild that we had to send videos and pictures to the official ICJ to be seen. I refuse to believe nobody in the ICJ or the ICC has seen a single video or picture from Palestine. And even after seeing hundreds upon thousands of our submissions and bringing it to the World Court, they decided, you can keep doing what you're doing, Israel, as long as you promise to give them aid later. I think that is a crazy thing to decide on as like a global government official. Again, upholding supremacy. They just said, Israel, you have to promise not to harm anybody for 1 month. That was like the main stipulation. And then it's only like a day after Israel continued to harm people. I'm not sure if you guys saw, but there were IDF soldiers, and at this point we should call them the ITF, dressed up as nurses, dressed up as patients, dressed up as doctors, who went into a hospital in the West Bank and harmed everybody inside. I feel like, again, we're at a point where it's not even about legality anymore. We know this is a war crime. You know it is. I know it's a war crime. But they don't do anything about it, right? I think that's what's so horrifying. It's like, yes, it's a war crime to pull an active firearm in any hospital. It's a war crime to, start any conflict within a hospital, especially with weapons. And again, it's an endless stack of war crimes. I would believe that all war crimes have been broken now. And again, it's like, what's the consequence for breaking a war crime, Israel? And then when I look and see there is absolutely none, when I look and see the ICJ did not line up any consequences if Israel did not be a good boy for a month, it scares me, right? Because again, there are children over there. There are men over there. There are women over there. Grandmas, grandpas, brothers, sisters, family traditions, cultures, dishes, pets, cattle, everything. It's like people's entire lives are being erased, like swept from under them, and there's nothing they can do. And then the world government will just look away as it's all happening. And again, we're at a point in history where, they're trying to make it illegal to be pro-Palestine to the point where jobs don't have to hire you, at least within the United States. And that's really scary. It's really scary. Military recruitment within the United States is drastically decreasing for obvious reasons, but they're not stopping. America is not stopping its terror. And again, as I stated earlier, it's like confirmed that all of these countries send their troops and weapons and money directly to Israel. And it's so obvious you would know why, right? Like, we already know why. If this was about Hamas, why are they in Syria? If this was about Hamas, why are they in southern Lebanon? If this was about Hamas, why are they in Yemen? If this was about Hamas, what are they doing in the Democratic Republic of Congo? In Somalia? There's so many different places that are being actively harmed to this second by Israel, which is essentially a white supremacist wet dream. And no government official and almost no country is doing anything about it. What's making me feel even crazier is people in Israel, the IDF itself, has a phone to record the atrocities that they are doing. It is crazy to watch. I watched a video of an IDF soldier have hundreds of people as hostages inside of a bus, and he was forcing them to say things. And if they didn't, they lost their lives. This is in 2024. That is horrifying to even fathom, right? I saw a video of children, literal babies, crying, bleeding as they're walking and running away because the school that they were in was being harmed. These are grown men, grown people harming literal kids over and over and over again. Half of the people who lost their lives in Palestine are children. I didn't watch a video on this, but I've heard people talk about it. There was a sniper from the IDF who was sniping at a family of 6 in their car. He took the lives of
5 of them, and the only person who lived was a 6-year-old girl. A 6-year-old girl who was stuck in this car with all of her family members who have passed away for 24 hours straight. And during these 24 hours, they were still trying to harm this little girl. Again, like, I don't know how much proof we're going to need at this point. You know what I mean? I don't know what else needs to be said or done before we can say, hey, maybe this is just terrorism, right? We have to just start saying it sometimes, right? This is just terrorism. No ifs, no ands, no buts, no questions, not defend. This is just terrorism, right? And it's been going on for like 5 months. We have been talking about this for 5 months now. 5 months. I have moved places. I have gotten a different job. I have done so many different things within 5 months. And during these 5 months, people are losing their lives constantly. 2 million people are losing their lives to starvation, to thirst, to disease, to bombardment. It's, again, just unacceptable. And again, I don't know how many times we're going to have to record it, take pictures of it, and talk about it before a government official says, hey, this is kind of fucked up. I think it is kind of fucked up that over 30,000 people have lost their lives. I do think it's kind of fucked up that this has been the most bombardment in history. Like, come on. The amount of bombardment that has happened in these 5 months is equivalent to what America did to Japan in World War II. It is equivalent to that, if not more at this point. And the same people, the only country in the world to use nuclear weapons on somebody, they're trying to tell us that they're the good guys. Fucking pisses me off.
I know you're overwhelmed. You're overstimulated. You're trying to compartmentalize. This is going to be uncomfy and it's going to be calling you in, because I was called in last week and it was uncomfy for me, but it needs to happen. So please muster all of the emotional, mental capacity you have, because this is a conversation we have to have. If it doesn't stick for you and doesn't apply to you, keep it scrolling. But it's going to be a call in for a lot of us. So the 2024 emergency watch list, we're going to go over the top 10 countries that need us to speak up. Now, I have multiple times on my page said that I believe Gaza is the heart of global change, that Gaza is the domino that's going to free and liberate the rest of the world, right? I truly do believe that. And I truly do believe that with the momentum behind liberating Gaza, it should be the front runner to the conversation because we have momentum. And if we liberate Gaza, it will mean that we successfully charged people for their war crimes, successfully decolonized, successfully gave reparations and rebuilt for indigenous people, successfully held our government accountable and showed our power when we're united, which then proves out that we can do it everywhere else. I strongly still believe that. But what I have been failing to do is consistently weave in the other catastrophes around the world. Because I have been so focused, and honestly, it's lazy. It's mentally lazy, it's emotionally lazy to not weave those in more consistently. And we need to change it. Because weaving together all of the catastrophes and naming all of them brings more power to the movement so that no one's left behind. Because if we put all this momentum behind liberating Gaza and we put all of our demands out there and we have all this momentum and then we get our demands, instead of having to restart from the beginning, each conflict one by one, which will take decades, we hit them all at once in our demands. We liberate everybody at once. I know that we're all struggling to even hold space for the things that we're seeing coming out of Gaza. But we have to. I'm not here to convince you to do it. We have to. Point blank, period. So I'm going to start by going down the 2024 emergency watch list country profiles. And then I'm going to be dedicating time to each of these top 10. There's 20 total on the list. But I'm going to hit the top 10 right now and then continue to go down the list. In this video, I'm just going to name them. I'm going to name them but I'll be creating deeper videos on each of them and adding playlists to the top of my page as well. So here is the top 10. Some of these you've been hearing already that we've been talking about, specifically the DRC, Ethiopia when it comes to Tigray. We've been hearing about Sudan. These are the top 10. I'm gonna briefly run through them in this video. Sudan, number 1, country on the verge of breakdown as an internationalized civil war escalates with devastating impacts on civilians. 24.8 million people in humanitarian need, which is over half the population. 5.1 million people internally displaced since April 2023. 1.3 million people have sought refuge in neighboring countries since April 2023. 5 out of 5 score for severity of access constraints. In debt distress. Now, I'm not going to go over all of this. That's what my other videos coming up in this series will be. I'm just going to go over high level each one. Palestine, we're very aware of what's going on here. 18K plus, which is actually 30K Palestinians unalived. 1.9 million displaced, 131 UN staff unalived, 3.1 million people in humanitarian need across the occupied territory. South Sudan, fallout from Sudan risks further spike in already high needs. 9 million people in humanitarian need, that's 72% of the population. 2.3 people internally displaced, over 392K crossed the border with Sudan since April 2023. 5.8 million people facing crisis or worse levels of food insecurity. 4 out of 5 score for severity of access constraints. High risk debt distress. Burkina, which is in West Africa, increasing besiegement nationwide drives deepening needs as violence spreads. 6.3 million people in humanitarian need. 2.1 people displaced. 46 locations under siege, affecting at least 1 million people. 4 out of 5 score for severity of access constraints. Myanmar, which is in Asia, sharp escalations in conflict risk further breakdowns across the country. 18.6 million people in humanitarian need, 2 million displaced, 15.2 million people facing moderate or severe levels of food insecurity, 160th out of 185 countries ranked on ND Gains Index for vulnerability to climate change. 5 out of 5 score for severity of access constraint. Mali, which is in West Africa, expansion of conflicts will exacerbate rising humanitarian needs. 6.2 million people in humanitarian need, 392,000 displaced, 1 million children under 5 at risk of acute malnutrition, 176 out of 185 countries on the vulnerability for climate change, 4 out of 5 severity access constraints. Somalia, heightened conflict and climate risk after record drought has eroded communities' resilience. 6.9 million people in humanitarian need, 3.8 million people internally displaced, 4.3 million people facing crisis or worse levels of food insecurity, 178th out of 185 countries ranked for vulnerability to climate change, in debt distress. Niger, coup drives significant expansion of humanitarian crisis as critical funding and imports dry up. 4.5 million people in humanitarian need, 700,000 people displaced, 3.3 million people facing crisis or worse levels of food insecurity, 47% of children are suffering from chronic malnutrition. Ethiopia, multiple conflicts and climate shocks compound humanitarian risk. 20 million people in humanitarian need, 3.1 million people internally displaced, 954,000 refugees and asylum seekers in Ethiopia, 4 out of 5 score for severity of access constraints, high risk of debt distress. And number 10, the DRC, or the Democratic Republic of the Congo, growing conflict risk in the east as both political and regional tensions grow. 25.4 million people in humanitarian need, the largest number in any country globally in 2024. 6.9 million people displaced, a 25% increase in 2023. 25.4 million people facing crisis or worse levels of food insecurity. 120 plus armed groups operate in Eastern DRC. 182nd out of 185 countries ranked on ND Gains Index for vulnerability to climate change. Those are the top 10 that I'm going to start really digging into each week. Now there's 20 total on the list, so I'm going to run through the remaining 10 that aren't ranked. We've got Afghanistan, Central African Republic, Chad, Ecuador, Haiti, Lebanon, Nigeria, Syria, Ukraine, and Yemen. To be very clear, all of these deserve our full attention, but they are ranked by severity. So the top 10 is where I'm going to be focusing on right now. And then once I get through those and dissect what's going on, how we can help raise awareness, I'm going to start tackling this other half of the list of these unranked crises on the list, okay? But they all matter. And weaving them together needs to become a priority, and we need to do better, including myself. So I'm calling you in love, we can do it.
You know what's actually disgusting? It's the fact that because of how biased and racist mainstream media is, that we have had to rely on social media to send our message out and to bring awareness about Palestine, that if you don't have this like parasocial relationship between, you know, the oppressed and the rest of the world, basically similar to how we have different people like Bisan, Mu'taz, Hand, and different content creators that people are relating to from Palestine. Basically, if you don't have that parasocial relationship, if you're not able to amass that type of following and make people relate to you because, you know, you're relatable for whatever reason, then you're not even gonna be given a chance to be heard. So we're seeing that unfold with what's happening in Sudan and Congo because there isn't social media use in those areas, and it's dangerous for them to film themselves talking about what's happening. Just kind of never makes it to anyone's radar, and it's just miserable because that is the job of mainstream media. Like, your news source should be telling you that XYZ is going on in the world, because even though Palestinians have managed to have this like very strong parasocial relationship, we've managed to convince people to boycott, to protest, to demand a ceasefire, etc., it's still like, with all that support, it still has amounted to nothing on the ground in Gaza. Things have only gotten worse, but the one good thing is that there's awareness. So like, imagine Sudan and Congo, where this parasocial does not even exist. This relatability factor does not even exist. And it shouldn't be on the people that are going through the suffering to do this type of reporting. That should be the job of freaking mainstream media. And it's not doing that job because it's aligned with governments.
Jim McHarris was a transgender man who lived his life having socially transitioned during the 50s. Unfortunately, he never got to see the end of that transition. So Jim was born in Meridian, Mississippi in 1924. And his parents died early in his childhood. Jim was raised by two sets of foster parents, and from a very young age expressed a strong distaste for anything feminine, except for women. The young Jim McHarris would often slip away to Jackson to hang out with friends. Jim found a lot of comfort in religion, and because of his genuine, sincere personality, he even became close friends with the bishop of a local tabernacle church, Bishop Smiley Jones. It was around this time that Bishop Smiley Jones noticed that Jim was not only attracted to women, but preferred men's clothing and living as a man as well. Now, the cool thing about Bishop Smiley Jones is that he knew about Jim's secret, which was at the time a secret, and he respected that. The church members said that his protection of Jim was indecent, but Bishop Jones just said, "I don't feel like it did any harm though." He's a legend for that, I'm sorry. So Jim transitioned in his early teens, and from around 1939, he started to move around the country quite a lot, presumably because of safety reasons and also just a general sense of not belonging quite anywhere. So during his transmasc life, Jim lived in Memphis, Chicago, and many other cities. In that 15-year period, he was known as a restless traveler, and he also worked as a short order cook, a taxi driver, a gas station attendant, a car mechanic, a shipyard worker, and even a preacher. And this was how he was able to ease some of his gender dysphoria by choosing the roughest jobs. Even Jim's landlady called him little brother. And with his handsome baby face and his husky figure, Jim didn't have any trouble pulling ladies, okay? He got women. Now, Jim was about 5'5", and he had many girlfriends, including one whom he often referred to as his wife. Now, in November 1954, an issue of Ebony came out, which covered the event that would change the trajectory of Jim's life. Now, this took place in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Hope I said that right. So one night, Jim was driving along, and he got pulled over by a white police officer for improper lights, which apparently was a common excuse for white police officers to harass and intimidate black drivers. Now, when the cop pulled Jim over, he did find alcohol in the car. Now, when the cop attempted to search the man's person, that was when Jim was like, "Take it easy, I'm a woman." This confused the police officer because the driving license said Jim McHarris. Now, unfortunately, Ebony magazine's covering of this story was was outrageous. It was abusive by today's standards, kind of making fun of him. Because the Ebony article then launched into an account of Jim McHarris's arrest, which was humiliating, and the trial, which gets even worse. So before he was sentenced to 30 days in jail, Ebony's article referred to what followed next as a courtroom striptease. So Jim walked into a nearby closet to remove his clothing, as per the instruction of the court, to show that he was indeed female anatomically. So Jim walked out with his shirt open to show the cloth wrappings that he used to bind his chest. In the words of Ebony, this is the moment when Jim McHarris revealed himself to be no man at all, but a fully developed, big-chested woman. Now, the writers at Ebony purposely ignored Jim's transgender status and continued to refer to him as a woman posing as a man, which just shows Ebony up, because all those who were near and close to Jim McHarris, when they were interviewed, referred to him with his he/him pronouns. Jim was a well-liked and respected man in the community. And instead of taking those comments as support and testament to the fact that he was a good person, what Ebony did was they used it to say, look, this is evidence, this is more evidence that he was able to fool the general public. So not only are they describing his experience in a public spectacle kind of way, but they are literally misgendering him on purpose, and thus, eradicating his experience and his existence as a transgender man. So Evelyn Hammonds also spoke on the fact that Ebony chose to continue disrespecting Jim McHarris and his identity. She described it as making him invisible, but at the same time hyper-visible, in the way that they would describe his physical features and, objectify him as a woman. Ebony was accused of over-schmegdualizing the entirety of Jim's being. Now, this gender revelation caused an uproar in the town, and that's when Jim's longtime friend, Bishop James, came under fire from the local residents and citizens because, in their eyes, this was wrong. Him being friends with Jim and him protecting Jim. Now, according to the article, the people most upset by this news were the cis women that Jim had been dating, as well as a woman who he dated while he was living in Memphis. She admitted in the Ebony article that he had been giving her money. Jim was given the option of either paying a $100 fine or spending 30 days in jail. Now, while Jim was working his sentence, he continued to dress in men's clothes, and he worked in the prison kitchen, but he was housed with a female prisoner. Now, this is where it gets a bit heartbreaking. Now, when he finished his sentence, Jim stepped out into Kosciuszko and found that the vibe had changed. People were frosty to him, people were no longer talking to him, no longer his friends. So he felt it was time to move on again. He said in the article, as he gathered and packed his belongings and prepared to move to Jackson, Mississippi, I ain't done nothing wrong and I ain't breaking no laws. Now, I love this for Jim, because he decided to live his life permanently as a man after all this. One thing he didn't do was register as a man, as all American men had to do during the time of military drafting. He was like... Now, unfortunately, this was the end of the road for Jim McHarris, certainly as far as the name goes anyway, because after 1955, no record of him can be found. And while he did serve some of his prison sentence as his government name, he may, because of that traumatic experience, have decided to get rid of the name Jim McHarris and start anew with a new identity in a new state. Presumably Jackson, but maybe he went somewhere else. One thing is clear is that Jim McHarris, the soul that lived in that body, tried to stay undocumented after his release from prison. Jim, or James McHarris, is now an official part of US Black heritage. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and follow for more.
I get people's frustration, I really do. But if you're not voting for Biden because of what has happened in Israel, but you voted for Biden in 2020, you voted for Hillary in 2016, you voted for Obama in 2008, 2012, you voted for who was running against Bush? I think it's Gore. If you voted for Clinton, if you've been voting since the 1940s, you have been voting for the situation we have with Israel. No matter who you voted for, GOP or Democrat.
So that was a little choppy towards the end, but what is your goal? First of all, it's Palestine. It's Gaza. It's the West Bank. It's Jerusalem. Your word choice to center Israel, very interesting. But also, what is your goal? Like, I've heard this line before, and it makes little to no sense from your own perspective. Because from your own perspective, your goal is for people to vote for Biden. And at this point, your goal is for people to vote, period. People are so disillusioned they don't want to vote at all. And you, with these goals, right, you just told them that no matter who you vote for, there will still be a genocide going on. In fact, all of their rights are upheld by genocide. And you're telling somebody who is becoming more and more disillusioned with the system about their position and their complicity in a system, right? That no matter what, that'll still happen. So do you think saying that inspires more or less involvement, personal sacrifice, time and effort into the system you want them to invest in? That makes no sense to me. Why would you say that? Your goal is to get people to vote. Your goal specifically is to get people to vote for Biden. Democrats win off of voter volume. Republicans win off of dogma. And you're telling them that no matter what, this would still be the situation. A genocide. Like, what is the goal here? Exactly. Furthermore, you're telling people that all of their rights are only upheld via genocide, which they don't want to be participants in, correct? So, like, are you trying to get people to not vote? Because at this point, even down ballot races are at risk. Because you're telling them, no matter what. And this is why you all advocating in this way makes you all so illogical. Because you want somebody to participate in A, B, or C action. They're telling you they don't want to because of A, B, or C reason. And you're telling them the action you want them to partake in would yield that result that they don't want anyways. Does that make any, like, I mean, I could not be seeing, it's possible I'm not seeing what your goal is here. And in the comment section, you agree with people calling people's outrage over Palestine performative. But after your video, the next video may be a video of a child with their head blown off. You don't even, like, you're not even putting two and two together that your advocacy for Biden is in the closest proximity possible to the very genocide they are disturbed by. Lastly, and here's the elephant in the room that I don't see anybody talking about, you all didn't start advocating for Biden in this way until Arab Americans and Palestinian Americans said that they weren't voting for Biden in order to leverage their votes to save their family members' lives. And you all, like, your first instinct as Democrats, like as a party, not just you specifically, your first instinct while they are trying to save their family members' lives with whatever they can from here, your instinct was to take that leverage away. Do you think people don't see that correlation? That timing? To me, you all are communicating in a way that you all don't know what you're trying to get people to do. Like, it makes very little sense the way you all are operating. I don't get it. Maybe you know something I don't.